Between Colby, Conner, Michael Chandler, Isreal Adesanya, trash talk is a huge part of MMA and one of the main reasons a lot of people love it. From all the clips and compilations, it's the big thing that serves to get us all invested. Except the issue is, it has become fake, cringe, and honestly led to some really underwhelming fights. Recently this weekend, Colby going absolutely insane on Leon Edwards to deliver one of the worst performances we've seen in title history. It really does stand the question of what is too far, and you can honestly look at it from both sides. Colby bringing up Leon's father that passed away, saying he's gonna see him in hell, was absolutely too far. I think even Colby fans would turn on him for that. Me, for one, didn't mind Colby before. I found his stick to be a little entertaining at times because it was just goofy, but that was just so far. I can't stand behind that guy. And then on Leon's side, he just said that about your father, and then in the end we get this really underwhelming performance. Now overall, I don't blame Leon for it. I don't think most people would blame Leon for it, but this isn't the first time. Like I said with Isreal had that whole Undertaker walkout versus Jared Cannonier and delivered the same performance as Leon. Now, you could say that this is another issue of the challenger not bringing it to the champion, but how are we going to get these hyped up fights time and time again for them to only underdeliver? Now, the difference between this and boxing is in boxing, this happens and you get a shitty fight, and the main event is really the only thing you care about. At least with the UFC, we have a lot of other fights on the card that matter, except for a lot of us hardcore fans, we love watching the weigh-ins, the press conferences, all the interviews, and it has led us to really get invested in these fights, and then you get super invested in the story and the narrative. That's why these fighters trash talk so much. Create narratives within the fight. We saw this a lot with Conner vs Dustin 3, where Conner was coming at his wife to get us that next level of care. Except the only thing with these narratives is you can tell when a fighter is playing a character, like we saw with Colby and Conner. It was really hard to actually believe that Conner was that mad at Dustin. His justification about Dustin bringing up the charity, is that really something? No, he was just trying to get himself into the fight, and I think we, the audience, know that, which causes us to cringe. Except the reason they still do it, as Dana White had said in his post-fight press conference, after Colby's stunt, the pay-per-view pre-buys went up 25%. So although we're cringing, the reason it's still happening is because it's converting such a large amount of sales. We saw this with Strickland and Dricus Du Plessis. Dricus and Sean got into it at the seasonal press conference, and that was another instance of taking it too far. Sean yelling derogatory words and Dricus bringing up Sean's tragic past of everything that happened with his father and him being abused. That's not the stuff that really matters in a fight. Except here's the thing, at the end of the day, that is building up hype and anticipation. Then they get into a fight at the event. That is another level of care that we all now have for the fight that we would not have had prior, and that's why it's going to continue happening. Except the thing is, there's been so many times where it was a good thing. Conner Aldo was an example of perfect build-up. It was fun, it was exciting, they were going at each other, and it was really real. You could tell that Conner really wanted that, and when they went out, they fought like it. Well, Conner knocked him out, but still, you could tell that Aldo was really mad, and you could tell the narratives made sense. Another perfect example, not to just bring up Conner again, Conner vs Nate was the exact juxtaposition of style that makes MMA and everything so exciting. Conner being this luxurious, lethal, precise striker versus Nate, the dirty boxer who doesn't give a fuck about anything. He's coming out just in a plain black shirt. That created narratives within the fight, as well as a vibe for the fight that we all care about. Except the thing is, trash talk nowadays is so forced. You see Sean O'Malley forcing trash talk from time to time, and it's just like, this isn't really it. So the thing with Sean, he usually will back down. A worse example is Garry. Garry going out claiming he's this and that on the mic. I know everyone's bagging on Garry. He did have to pull out of the Luque fight. I honestly think he was sick, but you could tell he's forcing it on the mic really bad, and we, the audience, recognize that. And when you can tell that it's too forced, we start to not care and also not like. There's been so many times where fighters that don't normally talk trash talk are all of a sudden now talking trash, and it's really awkward. You can tell when there's not too much steam on a fight, that all of a sudden at the press conference everyone's asking them these questions and they don't really know what to say, so they just go out and start yelling some nonsense. And I think it's led to some really unclever trash talk. I also think fighters are misrecognizing what people want. People don't care if there's that much steam on a fight, they just want some characterization, if that makes sense. For example, if you're cold and calculated like Alex Pereira, that's gonna draw in eyes to the fight. If you're fun and exciting like Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, that's gonna bring eyes to the fight. Coming out here and trying to act all cool and tough, trying to add steam to a fight that doesn't have steam prior, it's just gonna be a false start. And as we're seeing, the more it's going on, the more and more just crazy nonsense we're seeing spewed at press conferences. And we already listed some great examples, but looking at some of the past genuine beefs with Jones and DC, as well as the fact that a lot of fans appreciate competitive beef. DC and Stipe had your normal level of trash talk, but it was still an entertaining and fun fight that didn't need that personal beef to get us all invested. The fact that fighters want to show themselves off as being aggressive, over the top at press conferences, thinking that's what fans want is an issue, because even though it's selling, it's not like people are buying it because they support the fighters. They're really buying it to see if the fight itself is going to be good. And the point being that as time is going on and as they keep on getting disproven, going out there and saying it's going to be an absolute war, and then instead putting on these really crappy performances, like Colby versus Leon was supposed to be an absolute bloodbath, even without the personal beef. On paper, stylistically, that was supposed to be a great fight with Colby going at him from start to finish. Colby didn't even attempt to fight, and Leon was like, okay, then I can just stay on the outside and easily win this fight. And that's exactly what we saw happen. Leon even out-grappled him. And yeah, a lot of people might criticize Leon for not going for the finish, but at the end of the day, Colby was the one saying all this stuff like, I'm gonna run over you. So I think as time goes on, fans are already looking at Colby like, I don't know if I'm gonna buy his next fight. Him versus Masvidal wasn't super interesting. Him versus Leon, he literally got rolled. If you look at Sean Strickland talks so much crap at all of his press conferences and goes in and goes crazy, and his fights are relatively mundane. That being said, him versus Izzy, he obviously had that huge knockdown, which was super exciting. But if you look at some of his other fights, like Jack Hermanson, Cannonier, they're not super entertaining performances. And yeah, Sean Strickland does that thing in the last 10 seconds of the round where he'll start yelling at you like crazy, but he keeps on saying all this stuff like, I'm gonna run over you, I'm gonna do this and that, and then in turn he just ends up jabbing his way to victory. At the seasonal press conference, he did admit he's not gonna finish Dricus, which is, I guess, better. But at the end of the day, when you're showing yourself off to be a madman, that's what fans expect. And just because you can't have these crazy finishes doesn't mean you're a lesser fighter, but just don't go out there and claim you can, because everyone watching knows exactly what you're trying to do. They just know you're doing it to build the fight. And as this behavior is rewarded less and less, I hope you see more fighters reach out and be more personalized and unique. And I think it's interesting to see how much value performance is given over everything. Sean O'Malley doesn't come out and have the wildest trash talk like we were saying and like most people expected, but people buy his fights because his fights are really entertaining. Brandon Moreno doesn't really trash talk at all. He's one of the biggest stars in the UFC. Charles Oliveira doesn't even speak English, and most UFC fans absolutely love him because his fights are that entertaining. Michael Chandler can't trash talk for his life, but Jesus Christ, you know you're gonna buy that pay-per-view. Nobody wants these fighters to show up and act weird. In 2023, there's so many fans that are hardcore UFC fans that watch everything, that know when a performance is gonna speak for itself and when it isn't. I think too, you could see this with the fact that Colby Masvidal on paper should have been a massive pay-per-view, and yes, it was big, but it wasn't one of the biggest, even considering the fact you had Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. I think that's because people knew that Jorge really wasn't going to stand a chance in that fight. And it is overall a good thing that fans are that invested and fans know that much about the sport to know what is going to be a good fight and what is not. But I think a lot more fans nowadays, when they see a matchup with a lot of trash talk, you're sitting there like, maybe I'll just stream this one and see what happens. I think the biggest one being Dylan Danis versus Logan Paul. I think everyone was invested, but with this flood of streaming and knowing how much these fighters bullshit half the time, with that option, a lot of people just elect to illegally pirate the stream, and obviously that's not ethical, but people aren't as willing to buy the pay-per-view anymore because of how many times we've been done over by all these boxers and fighters saying they're going to do this and that and then ending up looking like a fool. Now, overall, is trash talk good? Is trash talk bad? Overall, it creates narratives, it creates fun, but I think at the end of the day, most of us just want to watch good fights, and if there's good trash talk, go for it. But if you're just gonna go up there and yell some nonsense, I think we can all just say leave it at home. If you want to watch a video on why no one likes Ian Garry, watch this one down here, leave a like, subscribe, and don't forget, we're just getting started, we're gonna stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next video.